Marin shoved open the heavy doors to the royal wing. Tom clutched tight against her hip, his small fists tangled in her skirts. The toddler's warmth was her anchor amid the court's chill marble halls, but the whispers hit like a slap before she could even catch her breath. The Lunas claimed him, a silk-robed courtier hissed to another, eyes darting toward her. Publicly, blood packed from the old knights irrevocable. Her stomach dropped, boots rooting to the stone as the swarm descended. Faces pressed in, pale and predatory under the arched ceilings dripping with shadowed tapestries, vampires in velvet and lace, their gazes sharpening on the child like hounds scenting prey. "Hand him over, keeper," one sneered, a woman with silver-threaded hair and claws half extended. "Selene Ardent invokes the moon's right, the boy's marked for her kin." Tom whimpered, burying his face in Marin's neck, his silver charm glinting cold against her skin. She tightened her hold, spine locking despite the tremor in her legs. "He's under royal wardship," she snapped, voice steady through sheer will. "No one's taking him." The courtier laughed, low and mocking. "Wardship, you're the housekeeper, girl." Low-born scraps don't rewrite pacts forged in blood eclipses. They closed tighter, a wall of silk and fangs, hands reaching until the air shifted, heavy with command. The doors at the far end of the hall boomed open, and King Aurelian Voss strode in, his presence a blade slicing the chaos. Tall, unyielding in black leather etched with silver wards, his eyes, storm gray and unblinking, swept the crowd. Silence crashed down, courtiers recoiled, bows rippling like wheat before a gale. "Enough!" His voice was velvet over steel, low but carrying to every corner. He didn't raise it, he didn't need to. Rowan flanked him, the guard captain's hand on his sword hilt, face a mask of quiet vigilance. Aurelian's gaze locked on Marin and Tom, lingering a beat too long enough to snag her breath before he turned to the swarm. "Luna Ardent's claim is noted. But no child leaves this palace on a whisper. A formal hearing convenes at dusk. All parties will present. Disperse." Murmurs rippled, but no one dared protest. They peeled back like mist under sun, casting venomous glances at Marin as they went. She stood frozen, Tom's weight grounding her, heart hammering against the old scar of being traded like chattel. The king's eyes flicked back to her, assessing, and she forced herself not to shrink. Rowan stepped forward first, his voice a rough anchor. "Marin with me." The king's quarters safer. He herded her past the thinning crowd, Tom fussing softly in her arms. Aurelian followed at a stride, his boots echoing like judgment. They entered the royal antechamber, a vaulted space of dark wood and flickering iron lanterns, the door sealing with a resonant thud. Only then did the king speak again, turning to her fully. "The boy clings to you. Why?" She swallowed, shifting Tom higher, his fragmented gaze darting between them, wide and trusting only her. "He's scared. Trusts what he knows." Her words edged defiant, though authority's weight pressed her shoulders down, memories clawing up, her foster mother's grip on her arm shoving her toward the debt collectors. "Take her. She's payment enough." The humiliation burned fresh, making her voice thin. "Please, don't let them." Aurelian raised a hand, silencing her without touch. His face was a carved mask, but something flickered in his eyes, hunger not for blood, but for the simplicity of that trust Tom offered so freely. "You will testify at the hearing," he said. "Your bond with him, speak true." "Testify," the word twisted like a knife. Marin's knees weakened, vision blurring with the echo of auction blocks and indifferent eyes bartering her life. She'd been 8, small enough to carry, sold to settle a tavern tab. No hearing then, no king to intervene, just hands exchanging coin, her pleas swallowed by laughter. Now here, under this vampire sovereign's gaze, the wound split wide. She nodded jerkily, unable to speak, clutching Tom as if he were her own fraying thread to sanity. The king watched her, unreadable, the silence stretching taut. Rowan cleared his throat. "Sire, the Luna's faction gathers in the outer halls. They'll push the pact hard, blood oaths bind deeper than law here." Aurelian's jaw tightened, a muscle feathering. "Let them. Tradition bends to reason." His gaze returned to Marin, voice dropping. You stay, both of you, in the palace under my supervision, as royal ward, hers and the child's. Forced proximity hit like cold water. Stay, in his shadow, his world of fangs and plots. Her pulse raced, but Tom's small hand patted her cheek, murmuring nonsense words that steadied her. She met the king's eyes, refusing to drop them despite the power thrumming off him. And if the hearing goes against us? It won't. The certainty was iron, but his stare held a fracture, loneliness cracking through the monarch's armor, as if her defiance mirrored his own buried ache. Rowan escorted them to a side chamber off the king's private wing, a guarded nook with a low fire crackling in the hearth and a wide bed piled with furs. Lock the door from inside, he muttered, pressing a key into her palm. I'll stand watch. No one enters without the king's word. The door clicked shut, leaving Marin alone with Tom. She sank to the floor, the toddler wriggling free to pat her face again, his silver charms swinging like a pendulum. Mama, he babbled, the word a dagger lucid, unexpected, tying him to ghosts none of them fully grasped. She pulled him close, breath hitching. The court's machinery ground on outside, Luna Seleni's claim invoking ancient pacts that demanded lunar blood return to lunar hands, no exceptions. Courtiers who'd swarm like vultures, eager for the spectacle. And Aurelian, feared king, isolated in his throne, now binding her to his side. No, she wouldn't freeze this time, not like before when she'd curled small and silent as her world shattered. Tom wasn't leverage, he was hers to shield. Vow hardened in her chest, she'd protect him, protocol be damned. Sneak him food from the kitchens if rations thinned. Stand in testimony even if her voice cracked under the memories. Make herself a target if it kept him from those claws. A soft knock rattled the door, Rowan probably with news. But deeper, she felt the king's presence lingering beyond, a shadow that both terrified and tugged. This hearing would strip them bare, her past sold like meat, his rule tested by a child's whim. Who they'd become to Tom, to each other, hung on the edge of dusk. Tom yawned, nestling into her lap, oblivious to the storm. Marin stroked his hair, resolve stealing. Let the Luna come, let the court circle. She'd fight visible, unbreakable. The fire popped, shadows dancing on the walls like waiting fangs. Outside, footsteps echoed, Aurelians retreating but not far. Proximity wasn't just orders, it was a tether pulling them into collision. Hours blurred into preparation. Rowan slipped in trays of bread and milk for Tom, his eyes scanning her face. The king's stalling for you, tradition would have handed the boy over by now. Why? She whispered, Tom dozing against her. Rowan shrugged, but his gaze softened. Not many stand firm here. Reminds him of losses. He left unspoken the consort's death, the court's whispers of a king hollowed by grief. Dusk neared. A page summoned her to the great hall where tiered benches rose like a coliseum under crystal chandeliers. Vampires filled the seats, silks rustling, eyes gleaming. Luna Selene ardent stood at the fore, regal in moon-silver robes, her faction arrayed behind, pale faces marked with crescent tattoos. Charismatic, unyielding, she met Marin's entrance with a nod that held no warmth. Aurelian ascended the dais alone, throne stark behind him. No crown, just authority carved into every line. The claim is heard, he intoned. Marin Ivers, temporary guardian, speak. She stepped forward, Tom in her arms. Rowan had insisted she bring him a living testament. The hall hushed, her throat closed, foster mother's voice overlaying, worthless chit, take her and go, but Tom's weight grounded her. He's no lunar pawn, she said, voice carrying clear. He knows me, calls for me, whatever pact you invoke, it doesn't erase that. Selene's eyes narrowed. Blood calls to blood, human, the charm proves it, moon-forged, he belongs with his kind. Aurelian leaned forward, gaze pinning the Luna. And if the child's will sways, test it. Murmurs erupted. Tom's head lifted, eyes locking on Cell. Murmurs swelled through the vaulted hall like smoke from dying embers, every vampire eye snapping to the toddler in Marin's arms. Tom's gaze locked on Luna Selene, unblinking, as if the silver charm at his neck hummed with recognition. Marin tightened her hold, her pulse hammering against his small back, the weight of the court stair pressing her ribs inward. Selene stepped forward, her silver-threaded robes whispering over the obsidian floor. In one fluid motion, she unfurled a brittle scroll, its edges frayed from centuries, and laid it before King Aurelian on his shadowed throne. "By the right of lunar binding enacted under the first moon pact," she declared, voice cutting the air like a blade, "this child bears the mark of my faction. Ancient law demands his return. Witness the ritual sigils etched in blood and starlight, binding his vein to ours since the cradle wars." The counselors leaned in, fangs glinting under torchlight, their whispers sharpening to hisses. Marin felt the documents pull like a noose tightening. She'd seen traffickers' ledgers before, but this was older, crueler tradition forged in forgotten massacres, where children were currency between courts. Aurelian sat unmoving, his throne a jagged spire of blackened iron, face carved from marble. His eyes, storm-gray and fathomless, swept the hall once, silencing it, before settling on Selene with the weight of unchallenged dominion. He inclined his head a fraction. "Proceed." Selene's lips curved, not quite a smile. She gestured to a second attendant who bore a velvet case. From it emerged a dagger, its hilt moonstone, and a ledger of illuminated pages depicting rituals. Infants marked at birth, wards traded in eclipses, bloodlines preserved through sacrifice. "The child's fragmented memories align," she pressed. "He calls to the moon. Deny this, and you fracture the pacts that hold your realm intact." Aurelian's fingers drummed once on the throne's arm, the sound echoing like a distant heartbeat. His gaze flicked to Marin then, piercing, holding her where she stood at the hall's edge. The air between them thickened, charged with the unspoken, his isolation mirroring her guarded scars. "The household keeper," he said, voice low thunder rolling through stone. "Marin Ivers, speak your claim." Her throat closed. Tom's fingers clutched her sleeve, grounding her as she stepped forward, skirts dragging like chains. "Your Majesty, I found him in a trafficker's cage, starved, collared like chattel. No ritual bound him then, he was meat for the highest bidder." A counselor rose sharply, Lord Vesper, his face a mask of aristocratic disdain, eyes narrowed to slits. "Lies from a low-born drudge, she scavenges scraps and spins tales to hoard what isn't hers. Traffickers, convenient fiction to cloak theft." Marin's words choked off, heat flooding her cheeks. The hall blurred, old instincts surging, shrink, yield, survive. She'd been 12 when her foster sold her for debts, voice silenced in a similar chamber. Now, with Tom trembling against her, the impulse clawed deeper, urging her to bow, to fade. Aurelian's hand lifted, palm out, stilling Vesper mid-snarl. "Concise," he warned Marin, the word of velvet lash reining her in before she unraveled. His stare held hers, not cruel but absolute, a king's reminder of the gulf between them, eternal predator to fleeting prey. Yet beneath it lingered something raw, a flicker of hunger not for blood but the truth she carried. She swallowed, forcing breath. "He clings to me." "That's his claim." Selene's laugh was silk over steel. "Sentiment, the law cares for bloodlines, not nursemaids." Aurelian rose then, his presence uncoiling like shadow given form, filling the hall. Courtiers shrank back, breaths held. He descended the dais steps, cloak trailing frost-kissed air, stopping mere paces from Marin. Up close, the power imbalance hit like vertigo, his height eclipsing her, scent of iron and winter pine invading her space. Tom's eyes darted between them, wide but trusting. "Captain Rowan," Aurelian said without looking away from her. The guard materialized at her side, broad-shouldered loyalty in leather and steel, his hand hovering near his sword but gentle on the boy's shoulder. "Escort the child and his guardian to the inner suites." "Full watch, no one approaches without my seal." Rowan's nod was crisp. "As you command, sire." Protection, Marin realized, laced with chains, surveillance dressed as safeguard. The king's gaze bored into hers a beat longer, a silent command, "Endure." Then he turned, reclaiming his throne, the moment fracturing like thin ice. She nodded mutely, letting Rowan guide her back, Tom's warmth her only anchor. But inside, the freeze spread, limbs heavy, voice locked away, the same paralysis that had let her be bartered once before. Ancient law clashed with the trafficker's modern filth in this hall, and now this protection felt like another auction block, gilded and inescapable. Her fingers dug into Tom's curls, willing defiance through him, even as her spine curved small. Rowan murmured low as they moved toward the arched doors, his voice a rumble meant for her alone. "Breathe steady, Marin, the king's word holds fangs." But his eyes flicked to the council, wary, loyal, yet shadowed by doubts he'd never voice here. Behind them, Selene pressed her case onward, scroll raised like a banner. The right demands witness, blood drawn under the next eclipse, delay invites fracture. Aurelian's response was ice. The court deliberates, all claims weigh equal until I rule. Marin glanced back once, catching the king's profile, jaw set against invisible strain. He commanded fear, yes, but in permitting her voice, however clipped, he'd cracked his armor, a vulnerability glimpsed only because she stood too close to the edge. The doors groaned shut, sealing the hall's tension inside. Rowan's hand steadied her elbow through a labyrinth of corridors, torches guttering in iron sconces. Tom whimpered softly, charm glinting as he twisted to peer back. "Mama," the word escaped him, fragmented, aimed at no one or everyone. Marin's chest seized. "SHH, little one, safe now." Lies tasted bitter, safety here was a king's whim, her role reduced to ward under guard. Rowan's presence chafed, ally or jailer. He shot her a look, half apology, half order, as they ascended to the inner suites, velvet-draped chambers that smelled of wax and old stone. "Stay put," Rowan said, positioning 2 guards outside. "Food and watchers, king's orders." He lingered a second, voice dropping. "Fight quiet, Marin. Selene's got history. He lost his own young to packs like these. Don't freeze on us now." She met his eyes, stubborn spark flickering against the inward chill. "I'm not property anymore." But the words rang hollow, the court's gears ground on, ancient cruelty devouring modern mercy, and her protection was just another cage, keys held by a king who starved for what she guarded most. Tom nestled closer, his small hand finding hers, breath evening into sleep. Marin sank onto the canopied bed, the room's opulence mocking her, silk sheets, crystal decanters of blood wine, bars disguised as filigree on the windows. The freeze lingered in her bones, whispering surrender, but Tom's weight anchored her. She wouldn't bow, not fully, not while he breathed against her. Outside, footsteps echoed Rowan's retreat, guards shifting. The court case coiled tighter, Selene's documents a noose around them all. Aurelian's choice loomed, tradition's blade or a remade rule with Tom and her as the hinge. Marin pressed her lips to the boy's forehead, resolve hardening against the fear. Whatever cage this was, she'd claw her way to its heart. Marin lifted her head from Tom's forehead, the boy's breath steadying against her chest as the heavy doors of the antechamber groaned open. King Aurelian Voss strode in without preamble, his shadow slicing across the marble like a blade, eyes fixed on the toddler in her arms. "Report," he said, voice low and edged, halting 2 paces away, close enough for her to catch the faint metallic tang of old blood on his breath. She straightened, cradling Tom firmer, ignoring the ache in her arms from hours of holding him through the court's endless murmur. "He's eaten, slept twice, no fever." The words came clipped, a servant's duty recited under that unblinking gaze. Servants didn't linger or look up, they delivered and dissolved. But Aurelian's stare pinned her, expectant, as if weighing her competence against the fragile weight she bore. He nodded once, sharp. "The midday audience convenes soon. Bring him." No warmth, no waste, just command. She dipped her chin, turning to lay Tom in the cushioned alcove crib, her fingers brushing his silver charm, a half-moon pendant glinting against his collar. Aurelian's boots scraped the stone as he circled the room, inspecting decanters and ledgers with predatory efficiency, but she felt his attention snag on her every move. By the time they entered the grand hall, the court had assembled in a rustle of velvet and whispers. Luna Seleni's faction clustered like storm clouds on the left dais. Tom whimpered at the noise, burying his face in Marin's neck, and she rocked him instinctively, murmuring nonsense to drown the rising babble. Aurelian took his throne at the hall's heart, a monolith of obsidian and gold, gesturing her to a shadowed alcove near his feet, visible to all, yet apart. The petition began smoothly enough, a lunar envoy droning about blood oaths and ancient claims. But then Lord Kale, one of Seleni's louder allies, surged forward, his voice cracking like thunder. "The whelp is lunar-born. You hoard him like a trophy, Voss, defying pacts older than your crown." Tom's flinch hit Marin like a slap. His tiny hands clawed her shoulder, a wail building in his throat. Aurelian's hand shot up, palm out, and the hall froze mid-breath. Silence crashed down heavier than any shout. "Enough," he said, the words a silken noose. Kale's mouth worked, face purpling, but no sound escaped. Aurelian's gaze alone choked it off, promising ruin without a twitch of temper. The courtier crumpled back into his seat, and Tom quieted, peeking out with wide eyes. Marin exhaled, pulse hammering. Competence, yes, but laced with something colder, a king's effortless leash on chaos. The audience dragged on, petitions blurring into threats veiled as protocol. Marin kept Tom hushed with a rag toy, her back to the alcove wall, but Aurelian's attention drifted downward. His eyes caught on the charm dangling from Tom's collar, the silver moon catching torchlight. For a breath, his mask slipped, just a flicker, brows knitting as if recognizing an old ghost. Then, so low only she could hear, he hummed. A fragment of melody, ragged and ancient like wind through cracked bone. "Hush now, little moon, cradle of night." Tom's eyelids drooped, thumbs slipping into his mouth, soothed by the threadbare tune. Marin stared, breath snagging. No one else saw, the court fixated on their own scheming, blind to the king crooning a lullaby like some weary father. It cracked something in her chest, humanity in the monster, private and piercing. Dismissal came swift, courtiers scattering like leaves. Aurelian rose, dismissing her with a tilt of his chin, but as she passed Rowan in the corridor, his broad frame blocking the archway like a sentinel, he gripped her elbow, pulling her into shadow. "Don't," Rowan muttered, voice gravel under his breath, eyes flicking to guards beyond. "That hum, the silences, its bait, Marin. Courtly kindness is a leash. You've been traded before, this place chews up the soft-hearted and spits out husks." Her stomach twisted, old scars flaring, the foster mother's cold bargain, debts paid in flesh and futures. She'd been small then, invisible, passed like coin. "I'm not soft," she whispered, Tom heavy and warm against her. "I'm keeping him alive." Rowan's jaw tightened, scar pulling white across his cheek. "Alive today, but trust the king, he's Voss. Absolute rule means you're his until Seleni's claim snaps the chain or he tires of the game." He released her, stepping back, but the warning lingered like smoke, reopening the vault in her gut where fear coiled. That night, in the dim nursery adjoining Aurelian's private wing, Marin defied the pull. Tom fussed in his crib, fever-damp curls plastered to his brow, the charm twisted against his neck. Servants made themselves small, eyes down, hands quick, gone. But as Aurelian entered for his nightly inspection, ledger in hand, she reached over the rail anyway, smoothing those curls with deliberate strokes, her palm lingering on the boy's scalp. Aurelian's step faltered mid-stride. He loomed in the doorway, broad shoulders filling the frame, eyes narrowing on her hand, defiant touch in his domain. The air thickened, charged with the court's unspoken code. Inferiors vanished into walls. Tom's whimpers eased under her fingers, but Marin's pulse thundered, waiting for the reprimand, the shove back to invisibility. Instead, he crossed to the crib in 2 silent strides, his presence a wall of heat and shadow. Up close, the king's face was all sharp planes and hollowed cheeks, starvation etched beneath the control. He didn't touch Tom, but his gaze traced the charm again, then her hand, steady, unyielding. The fever, he asked, voice a rumble that vibrated through her bones. Breaking, she said, not dropping her eyes this time. Testing. The power tilted, her refusal to shrink a spark in the void. His lips parted as if to command retreat, but he held, breath catching on some internal ledge. Outside, the court's murmurs seeped through stone, Seleni's faction plotting, loyalties fracturing, but here, in this sliver of quiet, the lullaby's echo hung between them. Tom stirred, mumbling a fragmented word, "Mama," and clutched the charm. Aurelian's fist clenched at his side, knuckles whitening. Marin smoothed one last curl, heart slamming against the boundary she'd just prodded. Guards shifted beyond the door. Rowan was right, kindness here was a trap. But that hum, that pause. It made the court's iron grip feel not like dominion, but a heart laid bare, treacherous and pulling. Aurelian turned away first, ledger snapping shut. "Watch him through dawn," command terse as ever. But as he departed, his shadow lingered a beat too long on the crib on her. Marin sank onto the stool, Tom curling into sleep, her fingers trembling now from the audacity. The cage wasn't just stone and law, it was this, glimpses of vulnerability that invited you closer, only to risk everything. Rowan's warning echoed as she dimmed the lamps, but resolve burned hotter. Seleni's claim tightened daily, documents piling like accusations, yet Tom's lucid babbles hinted at truths the court ignored. She'd test more boundaries tomorrow, claw deeper, for the boy. For the crack in the king's armor that might save them both or shatter her. In the hall's dying light, a distant shout cut short, Aurelian silencing another fool, no doubt, competence wrapped in control. But the lullaby hummed in her memory, a single thread unraveling the dread. The court felt less absolute now, more alive with peril, and far more dangerous to the heart. Marin's fingers trembled as she pried open the steward's locked cabinet in the shadowed archive wing, the iron key swiped from a careless servant biting into her palm. Dust motes swirled in the lantern's flicker, but her eyes locked on the ledger wedged behind a stack of yellowed parchments. She yanked it free, heart slamming against her ribs. The child's birth record, Tomas's name scrawled in fresh ink, the date twisted to align with Luna Seleni's lunar pact rituals. But the ink bled wrong, too even, too black, not the faded sepia of true court logs. Forged. Manipulated to hand the boy to Seleni's faction on a silver platter. Rage boiled up, hot and immediate, drowning the lullaby's echo. They were stealing him, rewriting his blood to fit their claim. She snapped the ledger shut and stormed out, boots echoing down the vaulted corridor toward the steward's alcove. Rowan had warned her off the archives, Aurelian's direct order, no political tangles, stay small, protect Tomas from the shadows. But this was no shadow. This was a blade at the toddler's throat. The head steward, Elias, hunched over his desk amid stacks of wax-sealed missives, his sallow face lifting as she burst in. "Ivers, you've no clearance." She slammed the ledger down, pages splaying open. "This. Explain the fresh ink on a 2-year-old's record. The dates don't match the wet nurse logs I cross-checked last week." Elias' eyes flicked to the book, then away, his thin lips curling. He rose slowly, voice a venomous whisper. "Girl, you tread where humans break. That ledger proves the moon's claim, ancient right. Touch it, and you invite fangs from both sides. Seleni's lunars will riot if it's tainted. The solar purists will gut us for weakness. Blood in the halls before dawn. Walk away, or Tomas loses more than a guardian." Threat hung thick as grave mist, his gaze sliding to the door where 2 guards lingered, hands on hilts. Marin's knees locked, that old frieze creeping in the echo of her foster parents' bargain voice, trading her for coin. But Tomas's face flashed, wide eyes clutching his silver charm. "No," she snatched the ledger back. "Hide your forgeries, I'll see this aired." She whirled out before he could lunge, pulse thundering, the weight of his warning coiling in her gut. Violence between factions. Let it come, better than surrender. The small council chamber loomed ahead, its obsidian doors cracked for the late session. Aurelian, Rowan, 3 faction heads, and Selene herself, voices murmuring like distant thunder. Marin's order was clear, observe from the antechamber, silent, but the forgery burned in her hands. She shoved through the doors, all eyes snapping to her. Aurelian's gaze pinned her from the head of the crescent table, silvered black hair framing a face carved from marble, cold command that made courtiers blanch. "Marin, out, now." She didn't bow, didn't shrink. "Not until you see this." She thrust the ledger forward, voice cracking but steady. Tomas's record forged, inks new, dates shifted to prop Seleni's claim. Elias did it, or someone pulled his strings. Gasps rippled. Selene leaned forward, her lunar pale features sharpening, eyes like twin moons. "Lies from a keeper's tongue, that pact is blood-bound." One solar lord snarled, fist slamming wood. "Treachery, if true, enough." Aurelian's voice sliced like a blade, silencing the room. His eyes bored into Marin, a storm brewing, fury, yes, but something rower flickering beneath, gone in a breath. "You were ordered clear, this defies me." Her chin lifted, stubborn fire overriding the power chasm between them. "Orders don't erase forgery, the child's not a pawn." Rowan shifted at Aurelian's side, hand twitching toward his sword, gaze flicking between them, loyal dog caught in crossfire. The king rose, towering, the air thickening with his presence, every inhale a reminder of fangs and eternity against her fragile pulse. Yet he didn't strike, didn't command her dragged away, tensions stretched, breaths held. "Adjourn," he said finally, flat as death. "All but Rowan." Courtiers filed out, Selene shooting Marin a venomous glance. The doors thudded shut. Marin stood frozen, ledger clutched like a shield, guilt already gnawing. She'd forced his hand in front of witnesses. Aurelian turned to her, voice low thunder. "You risk everything. Uprising now shreds the court." "It's truth," she shot back, but her voice wavered, the imbalance crashing down. He could end her with a word. He stepped closer, close enough she felt the chill radiating from his skin, his scent of iron and nightshade curling around her. "Truth without tactics is suicide. Yours." "The boys?" His fingers brushed the ledger, not taking it, but lingering, a pause heavy with unspoken want. Protective instinct warred in his eyes, the feared king's mask cracking just for her. Then he pulled back. "Rowan, seal this chamber. Burn no copies yet." Rowan nodded, jaw tight, but obeyed, barring the doors. Alone now, Aurelian paced to the hearth, flames casting jagged shadows on his sharp profile. The forgery holds Selene's hand steady, expose it raw, her lunars revolt, claiming persecution. Solars strike back. Tomas dies in the crossfire. He met her eyes, decision hardening. "We suppress." Quietly, "I authorize Elias silencing, cover the ink with a royal seal, no trial yet." Marin's breath caught. "Suppress, cover a lie, you'd bend justice for peace." His laugh was bitter, hollow. "Justice is the first casualty in my court. I've held this realm 5 centuries by gray choices. This one for him, for you." The words hung, raw vulnerability slipping through, lonely king choosing shelter over sanctity, his sacred rule of unyielding truth fractured on her behalf. She saw it then, the cost. He defied his own iron code, the merciless facade every courtier feared, all to shield her defiance. Guilt slammed her like a fist. She'd made him compromise, tainted the control that kept him enthroned, kept chaos at bay. Her stubbornness hadn't freed Tomas, it chained the king to her peril. "You shouldn't have," she whispered, stepping back, the ledger heavy as sin. His gaze followed, lingering too long, a hunger there not for blood but something deeper, forbidden. The power tilted, her refusal to bow pulling at his isolation, even as it endangered them both. Rowan cleared his throat from the door. "Sealed, sire, Elias is detained quietly." Aurelian nodded, but his eyes stayed on Marin, the silence electric. "Go to Tomas." "Stay invisible now." Not a command, almost a plea. She turned, throat tight, the forgery's weight morphing into regret. Her defiance had saved nothing yet, only forced the king to soil his hands, bending absolute rule for a human who refused to kneel. The court pulsed with fresh peril, factions simmering, and now his gaze haunted her steps, a dangerous thread binding them tighter. In the nursery wing, Tomas stirred in his crib, silver charm glinting. She lifted him close, his small warmth against her chest the only anchor. But the lullaby hummed back, twisted now with guilt. She'd unraveled more than a forgery, she'd cracked the king's armor, and gods help them if it shattered. Marin's arms tightened around Tomas as Luna's voice sliced through the vaulted hall, her words a velvet blade demanding the child's return to lunar rites. The toddler squirmed against her chest, his silver charm catching the torchlight like a winking accusation. Courtiers leaned forward in their shadowed alcoves, the air thick with the scent of wax and old blood, every eye fixed on the throne where King Aurelian sat unmoving, his face a mask of glacial control. Marin Ivers, Luna pressed, her silver-threaded gown shimmering as she paced the mosaic floor, you stole what the moon's pact claims. The boy's veins sing of our lineage, return him or face the ancient forfeiture. Tomas lifted his head, fat fists rubbing his eyes. The hall fell to a breathless hush. Then, clear as a struck bell, he pointed at Marin and said, Marin, take Tom from dark hole, bad men's chains, Marin good. Gasps rippled outward like stones in still water. Luna froze mid-step, her charismatic poise cracking into raw shock. What trickery is this? A child babbles, but Tomas twisted toward her, small brow furrowing. No moon lady, Marin home, dark hole traffic men's. Marin's heart slammed against her ribs. The words hung there, unadorned truth from a mouth that had only cooed nonsense for weeks. She felt the court's gaze shift, a tide turning from Luna's fervor to the boy in her arms. Her knees locked, she'd sworn silence to protect them both, but now the truth clawed free on its own. Luna whirled to the throne. Majesty, this is coercion, the pact. Silence? Aurelian's voice cut low, commanding, but his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, locked on Tomas with something unguarded flickering beneath. He rose halfway from his seat, one hand gripping the armrest until the obsidian cracked faintly under his fingers. Marin swallowed, the weight of every stare pressing her forward. She stepped to the oath circle's edge, the chalk lines glowing faintly under her boots, binding any lie to agony. Rowan shifted at her side, his guard stance a silent shield, but she waved him back. No hiding now. Your Majesty, Luna Selene, she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her gut. I took Tomas from traffickers in the Undercity Warrens 3 moons past. They had him chained in a crate, marked for sale to the highest bidder, human or fang. I broke the locks, killed 2 to do it, and ran. He's no lunar heir by theft, he's a survivor I claimed because no child deserves that dark. The admission landed like a gauntlet. Murmurs erupted, shock from the solar nobles, dawning fury from Luna's lunar faction. A lady in crimson fainted into her seat, fanned by frantic hands. Luna's face drained to ash, her legal scaffold crumbling under the boy's unprompted echo. Aurelian didn't silence the chaos. He leaned forward, his gaze pinning Marin not with the king's customary ice but a raw hunger that made her breath catch. For a heartbeat, his mask slipped, lines etched deeper around his mouth, eyes shadowed by a grief he'd buried under centuries of rule. You kept him close, he said, voice barely above a thread directed at her but echoing for all. As I have. The words cracked open something private, a confession dragged unwilling from his chest. After my consort fell to the purge, the silence here, he trailed off, fist unclenching, vulnerability raw in the way he looked at Tomas, as if the boy filled a void no crown could touch. The hall splintered. Solar courtiers whispered of mercy, their sympathy tilting toward the child. Lunars hissed betrayal, clutching lunar sigils. Luna staggered back a step, her claim eviscerated by evidence no pact could refute, a toddler's memory, sworn and pure. Marin met Aurelian's stare, and for the first time she saw past the monster of whispers. A man hollowed by loss, clinging to this small life as she did, not for power, but for the warmth that thawed his endless night. His loneliness mirrored her own scars, the foster who'd sold her like chattel, yet he ruled it, armored where she shrank. And in his eyes she glimpsed recognition. Her loyalty wasn't bought by court games or bloodlines. It was bone-deep, forged in the Warrens' filth, fierce enough to defy kings and moons alike. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, a bridge forming in that charged silence. Luna rallied, voice sharpening. The boy's words prove nothing, blood speaks louder. They prove everything, Aurelian interrupted, rising fully now, his presence flooding the hall like shadow overtaking flame. The child names his rescuer, not your stars. Custody stands with the guardian who bled for him. His tone brooked no appeal, but beneath it lingered that fracture the king exposed. Rowan exhaled quietly at Marin's elbow, his hand brushing her arm in reassurance. The court buzzed, factions fracturing further, sympathy carving lines where unity had pretended to hold. Luna's faction murmured retreat, her footing gone, eyes darting as if recalculating alliances. Marin clutched Tomas tighter, his small hand patting her cheek. "Marin good," he mumbled again, oblivious to the quake he'd unleashed. But she felt it, the shift not just in law but in the man on the throne. He'd let her speak, let truth pierce his court, because the boy and perhaps she touched the ache he hid from all. Aurelian's gaze lingered on her a beat too long, a silent acknowledgement passing between them amid the storm. For the first time, the power between them felt less like a chasm and more like shared ground, fragile but real. As guards ushered Luna's retinue toward the outer doors, her glare promised reprisal, but the hall's tide had turned. Marin stood her ground, Tomas's weight her anchor, the king's rare warmth her unforeseen ally. The case wasn't ended, lunar pacts twisted like thorns, but in that moment assumptions shattered and two guarded souls glimpsed each other truly. Luna Cellini wrenched her arm from a guard's grip at the hall's threshold, her silver-threaded robes swirling like storm clouds. "A blood test, your majesty, now, the child's veins will speak the lunar pact's truth. Hand him over or the moon itself brands you oathbreaker." Aurelian rose from the throne, his shadow swallowing half the chamber, every eye snapping to him. Marin clutched Tomas tighter, the boy's small fingers twisting in her sleeve, his breath hot against her neck. The king's gaze flicked to her, just a heartbeat before stealing on Cellini. "No seizure, no spectacle. The inquiry proceeds privately under my seal at a measured pace. The child remains with his guardian until proven otherwise." Murmurs erupted like cracking ice. A gaunt lord in crimson velvet, Lord Draven, whispers named him, leaned forward from the front ranks, his fangs glinting in accusation. "Measured pace? This reeks of favoritism, sire. The low-born keeper flouts tradition and you shield her. The throne's impartiality crumbles before our eyes." Others took up the cry, voices layering in a venomous chorus. "Weakness invites chaos. Lunar rights demand swift justice." Marin felt the weight of their stares, pinning her like stakes, Tomas squirming against her as if sensing the noose tightening. Aurelian's hand clenched the throne's arm, knuckles whitening beneath eternal pallor. He loathed their bleeding, but worse was the truth gnawing inside. Shielding her exposed the fracture in his iron rule, the loneliness he'd buried under decrees. Still, he would not yield the boy to Cellini's zeal, not when Tomas's fragmented cries in the night echoed his own lost consort's final pleas. Draven pressed on, sneering toward Marin. "The human wench parades the child like a trophy, unbecoming even for chattel. Confine her to quarters if you must indulge this farce, lest she poison more minds with her mortal stench." The insult landed like a lash. Aurelian's vision narrowed, rage surging unbidden, a feral impulse to rend the fool's throat. He surged forward a step, voice a glacial thunder. "Enough! The guardian's movements are restricted. No halls without escort, no audiences unattended. Guards, enforce it. Draven, one more word and you'll taste the dungeon's hospitality." Silence crashed down, courtiers recoiling as if slapped. Marin froze, Tomas whimpering softly. "Restricted, escorted." The words clawed old scars, her foster mother's cold bargain, trading her body for debts, chaining her to survival's yoke. She'd fought to stand tall here for the boy, and now the king caged her under protection's guise. Her jaw locked, trust fracturing like thin ice. Cellini's retinue was shoved out at last, doors booming shut, but the damage lingered in the charged air. Aurelian sank back, pulse thundering in his veins, a rare slip, his control frayed by that barb against her. He met her eyes across the hall, saw the wariness bloom there, and something hollow twisted in his chest. Marin turned without a word, Tomas heavy in her arms, weaving through the dispersing crowd toward the side archway. Whispers trailed her like smoke, "See, the king's pet." She ignored them, chin high, but inside fury boiled, competent, useful. That's all she was to him, a tool to wield, then leash. In the antechamber's dim alcove, shadowed by tapestries of fang and blood moon hunts, she sank onto a bench, rocking Tomas as his fussing peaked into hiccuping sobs. "SHH, little moon calf," she murmured, pressing her lips to his curls, inhaling his milky scent amid the court's rot. But her mind raced. The blood test loomed, Seleni's claim a blade at their throats, and now Aurelian's protection mirrored every chain she'd clawed free from. Footsteps echoed, heavy, deliberate. Rowan Hale appeared, his guard's cloak scarred from border skirmishes, face etched with quiet disapproval. "Marin, let me take him, you've not eaten since dawn and the kitchens send word." She hesitated, pride warring with exhaustion, then nodded, passing Tomas over. The boy latched onto Rowan's broad shoulder, thumb in mouth, silver charm glinting at his neck. "Thank you," she whispered. "The king's decree, it stings like ownership." Rowan's eyes darkened, flicking to the hall beyond. "Aurelian's not his sire in this, bears too much alone." He shifted Tomas higher. "Rest, I'll watch the door." She slipped away to her quarters, the corridor's torchlight flickering like mocking eyes, escorted fine. She'd walk alone in her rage. Aurelian dismissed the court with a curt wave, the throne room emptying under his glare. Draven slunk out last, head bowed, but the accusation festered. Favoritism, weakness. He paced the dais, fangs aching with unspent fury, not at the rival but at himself. Protecting her had twisted into punishment, echoing the cruelties he'd sworn to end after his consort's death. The boy deserved better, so did Marin with her unyielding spine amid the wolves. Rowan's report came swift, the child safe, Marin withdrawn. Aurelian nodded, dismissing even his captain, then strode to her guarded door. 2 sentries stiffened, he waved them aside. "Leave us." Inside, the chamber was sparse, human simplicity amid velvet opulence. A cradle, scattered toys carved from bone, her scent of earth and resolve. Marin stood at the window, arms crossed, back rigid as he entered. No bow, no deference. The door clicked shut. "You overreached," she said without turning, voice steady but laced with ice. "Insult or not, you collared me in front of them all like I'm property to restrict. I've bowed to enough masters, won't do it for you." He stopped paces away, the power chasm between them a live wire. She was right, his impulse had caged what he yearned to free. Loneliness clawed deeper, no consort's touch in decades, no equals fire. Draven's words were filth. I reacted. "The restriction stands for your safety, but I see it wounds. It was poorly done." She whirled, eyes flashing, stubborn, unbroken. "Safety or control, you veto Selene to shield us, then punish me for standing. What's the line, king, when does protection become the chain?" Her defiance pierced him, stirring a hunger beyond blood for this, her unyielding heart. He stepped closer, careful, hands open at his sides. "No command, no throne's weight. No line today, I erred. Lift the escort for private halls, your word as bond. Forgive the failure, Marin, not as king, but as the man who won't see you bartered again." She searched his face, breath catching at the raw plea in his eyes, vulnerability cracking the sovereign's mask. Tomas's guardian, low-born survivor, she saw the starvation there, mirroring her own guarded scars. Trust didn't rebuild in words alone, but this. This was a fracture mended, fragile as first frost. A knock shattered the pause, Rowan, Tomas dozing against his chest. The boys settled, but scouts report Selene rallying at the gates. Blood test or no, she'll push. Aurelian nodded, gaze lingering on Marin. "We face it together, no more collars." She exhaled, tension easing a fraction, taking Tomas back. The repair hung tenuous but real, a thread pulled taut between throne and hearth as lunar shadows lengthened outside. Marin's quills scratched across the ledger's vellum, the ink bleeding slightly under her trembling pressure. Tomas slept against her chest, his small breaths a fragile rhythm in the dim keeper's alcove, but her pulse hammered like a war drum. Another hearing loomed tomorrow, Luna's faction pressing their blood-packed claim, whispers of Marin herself being bartered off to settle old debts. She couldn't let them take him, not again. With a forged entry * transferred to Alara Voss, underservant per royal decree *, she sealed the lie, her stomach twisting as she pressed the royal stamp she'd lifted from a careless scribe. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, too heavy, too precise. She snapped the ledger shut, shoving it under a stack of linens just as the door swung open. King Aurelian filled the frame, his silver eyes locking onto her like chains. "The child's schedule," he said, voice a low blade. "Where is it?" Her mouth went dry, Tomas stirring in her arms. She thrust the top ledger forward, the real one, sanitized. But his gaze flicked past to the disturbed pile. He crossed the room in 2 strides, snatching the falsified page. The air thickened as he scanned it, his face hardening to marble. "You dare," the words sliced, betrayal raw in his tightened jaw. "After I spared you the council's wrath, I had to," she stammered, clutching Tomas closer, her knees buckling under that stare. Authority crushed her like it always had, freezing her spine. "They're coming for him, for me. Ilara's loyal, she'll hide him until what? You unravel my court?" He ripped the page free, crumpling it in his fist. Pain flashed in his eyes, sharp, unguarded, before the mask slammed down. "Guards!" 2 vampires materialized from the shadows, iron grips seizing her arms. "Confine her to the east quarters. No visitors, no child." Tomas wailed as they pried him away, her nails scraping futilely at unyielding flesh. "Please, he's not safe." The door slammed, locks grinding into place. She collapsed against cold stone, breath ragged, the echo of her forgery a noose tightening. She'd protected him once by making herself small, now she'd shattered everything. Aurelian stormed through torchlit halls, Tomas bundled in Rowan's arms ahead, the toddler's cries knifing deeper than any blade. Betrayal burned, she'd looked at him with trust hours ago, that fragile thread now severed. His council's voices haunted, humans scheme, traditions hold. But loneliness clawed harder, the consort's ghost whispering he'd fail them all if he softened. Alarms shattered the night, screams from the servant wings. "Intruders," Rowan barked, sword drawn, "lunar assassins targeting the child." Aurelian's blood ignited. Protocol demanded he summon the guard captain, retreat to throne room safety while council debated. But Tomas's wail pierced him, small fists clutching Rowan's collar. "No, not on his watch." "Rowan, hold the line here," he snarled, fangs bared, ignoring the captain's wide-eyed protest. "I'm going in." He blurred into motion, shadows parting like prey. The household annex erupted, moon-silvered blades flashing, Ilara's body slumped in a pool of blood, 2 cloaked figures lunging for a hidden cradle. No child there, Marin's lie had bought seconds. 1 assassin world, dagger arcing for his throat. Aurelian caught the wrist, snapping bone with a twist, then drove fangs into the throat, hot blood flooding his senses. The second fled, but he pursued, tackling through a casement window into the moonlit courtyard. Glass rained, claws raked his side, venom burning. He roared, pinning the attacker, ripping the mask free, a lunar scout, eyes wild with fanatic zeal. "The moon claims its own," the vampire spat. "Not tonight." Aurelian's blade ended it, precise through the heart. Panting, wound searing, he staggered back, the annex secured. Guards swarmed, but he'd led the breach, king's blood spilled for a toddler's life, protocol be damned. Dawn's gray light filtered through barred windows when the door unlatched. Marin scrambled up, heart lurching as Aurelian entered alone, his tunic torn, blood crusted on his neck. No guards flanked him. Tomas wasn't with him. "Where is he?" she demanded, voice cracking despite the fear. "Safe." "With Rowan?" He gestured, and she stepped into the corridor, free. His eyes met hers, stripped of ice, raw, haunted. I locked you away from fear, Marin, fear you'd slip my grasp like she did, fear I'd break if I let you close. Another failure carved into me. She froze, the king's vulnerability a live wire. I forged the ledger to save him, I'd do it again. He nodded, jaw tight, and I'd defy the council again for him. He turned to Rowan, waiting in the hall with Tomas giggling over a wooden horse. Captain, you stand as the boy's visible guardian now, public writ, witnessed by court. No claims touch him under your watch. Rowan's nod was steady, taking the toddler without question, his gaze flicking between them, sympathy shadowed by unspoken doubts. As you command, sire. Aurelian faced her, closer now, the air charged. Your lie saved seconds, my breach saved his life, we're even. But as Rowan carried Tomas away to quarters under guard, Marin sank onto a bench, guilt coiling like smoke. She'd twisted the law, endangered Alara's life with her desperate script. Yet relief flooded hot, the king had charged into fangs and steel, throne forgotten for the boy she guarded like her own scarred heart. His rules bent, cracked even under that small weight. He lingered, hand brushing hers, a pause heavy with unspoken hunger. Stay close, he murmured, voice rough, the moon's not done. She met his gaze, stubborn fire flickering past her frieze. For once, authority didn't crush, it shielded. But the court's eyes watched, lunar shadows coiling tighter, her forgeries cost etched in blood on the stones. A scholar in dust-caked robes thrust a brittle scroll across the court's obsidian dais, his voice cracking like dry bone. The Pact's hidden clause, Your Majesty, Clause 7, right of the silvered thorn. Lunar claim grants custody of the child, but only through the right. The toddler must endure thorns woven into his flesh, drawing blood under the full moon to bind him eternally to Seleni's line. Marin's arms tightened around Tomas, the boy's small body warm and heavy against her chest, his silver charm glinting like a warning. The court's hush thickened, eyes from shadowed alcoves pinning her where she stood before the throne. Aurelian's gaze held her still, unblinking, a silent anchor amid the rising storm, but the Luna's factions stirred, silk robes whispering like knives. Luna Selene ardent rose from her curved bench, her pale hair unbound and wild, eyes gleaming with the fervor of the wronged. I invoke it now, she declared, voice slicing the air. Tomas bears the mark of moonblood, the right is his path to dignity, not cruelty. Deny it, and you deny our ancient right. Murmurs erupted, courtiers leaning forward, fangs peeking in anticipation as guards shifted, hands on hilts. The child's safety dangled by this thread, tradition's blade hovering. No. Marin's throat burned, her frieze cracking under the weight of Tomas's trusting weight. She wouldn't let them carve him for politics. Stepping forward despite the guards' warning glares, she raised her voice, steady as iron despite the tremor in her knees. This isn't dignity, it's torture for a 2-year-old who can't consent. He's not a pawn for your bloodlines or pacts. His autonomy matters more than your rights. Force this, and you're no better than the debts that sold me as a girl. Gasps rippled, a lunar advisor hissed, but Aurelian's hand flicked up, silencing them. His face remained a mask of regal ice, yet his eyes flickered, something raw flashing before control snapped back. Luna whirled on Marin, lips curling. You, a keeper. Speak of autonomy when you forged papers to steal him? The right honors him. By scarring a baby? Marin shot back, Tomas whimpering softly against her neck, his tiny fingers clutching her collar. Call it honor if it salves you, but it's violence dressed as law. He's a child, not your faction's trophy. The king's voice cut through like winter wind. Enough, the court will deliberate. He rose, black cloak pooling like spilled ink, gesturing to his advisors. Closed session. Now, courtiers filed out under guard escort, lunar eyes burning holes in Marin's back as Rowan Hale gripped her elbow, steering her and the boy toward a side alcove. Stay sharp, he muttered, his scarred face tight. You've rattled them. But Marin caught Aurelian's parting glance, intense, probing, as if her defiance had pierced his armor. For the first time, authority hadn't swallowed her whole, it had listened. In the veiled chamber behind the throne, Aurelian paced the rune-etched floor, shadows from iron lanterns twisting across his advisors' tense faces. The air reeked of old vellum and wax seals. "The full right," he said flatly, halting before the lead scholar. "Details." The man bowed low, sweat beading despite the chill. Thorns from sacred lunar vines, sire driven into the palms, soles, and brow. Blood spilled until he screams the binding oath. Survivors bind fully, most children do not. Aurelian's fangs ached, a hollow starvation gnawing deeper than bloodlust. Not for the boy, for the echo of his lost consort, her laughter silenced centuries ago, leaving him this throne of isolation. Tradition had bound him too, chaining mercy behind fear. No more. "Draft amendments," he ordered two scribes, voice low thunder. "Invoke the sovereign override, nullify the punitive elements, reinterpret the right as symbolic, bloodless. If the pact crumbles, so be it." The advisors exchanged glances, one protesting. "Sire, the Lunars will revolt. Factions splinter, let them." He leaned in, eyes blazing crimson. "The child is no bargaining chip, neither is she." Marin's face lingered in his mind, her stubborn fire a mirror to his buried ache. To shield them meant exposing his fractures, risking the court's knife at his throat. Rowan entered last, barring the door with a nod from the other officers, three trusted captains, grizzled and loyal. Aurelian faced them squarely, shedding the crown's weight in this sanctum. "I will end this ritual, publicly if the vote fails. My capital be damned, it keeps the boy from thorns and her from their games." Rowan crossed his arms, jaw set. "You've bent for less, Majesty, but this," Luna's block holds a third of the vote. "They'll paint you soft, human-tainted." Aurelian's laugh was bitter, stripped bare. "Soft, I've buried consorts and crushed rebellions to keep this court intact, but watching that woman stand for the child." He trailed off, fist clenching. Loneliness clawed, raw as an open vein. Attachment undid kings, yet denying it doomed him further. "He's innocent. She's forged her chains into steel for him. I won't let tradition devour them." One captain shifted uneasily. "And if they invoke full pact breach?" "War with the moons? Then we fight as family, not fractures." Aurelian's gaze swept them, protective instinct surging like venom through his veins. "Rowan, guard her quarters doubled. No lone walks. The forgery's blood price hangs over her still." Rowan nodded, a ghost of approval in his eyes. Already done, the boy's taken to her, clinging like she'll vanish. Aurelian exhaled, the vow settling heavy. Generations of vulnerable bound by this clause, children like Tomas, guardians like Marin, traded and torn. He'd append it, tradition be damned. But the cost? His control fraying at the edges, her fire tempting him toward ruin. Outside, the court reconvened under starlit vaults, lunar banners fluttering like threats. Marin cradled Tomas in the alcove's dim safety, Rowan's bulk a reassuring shadow. The boy stirred, murmuring man in his fragmented slur, silver charm warm against her skin. Her heart twisted, defiance had bought time, but the right's shadow loomed, thorns waiting. Aurelian re-entered to thunderous anticipation, scroll in hand. His voice boomed, masking the fracture within. "The vote proceeds, but hear this, the right's cruelty ends tonight." Luna surged forward. "You cannot, I can." "And I will." His eyes found Marin across the throng, a lingering promise in the pause, breath caught, power tilted, not in conquest but choice. The vulnerable unbound, at last one king's quiet war begun. Shouts erupted from the lunar faction's benches like shattering glass. A silver-robed zealot lunging forward with a blade glinting under the throne room's eternal dusk. "The moon's blood claims the child, your throne defiles it." The knife slashed toward Tomas in Marin's arms, her body twisting instinctively to shield him as guards collided in a frenzy of fangs and steel. Chaos swallowed the court, blood sprayed from a guard's throat, the assassin's scream twisting into accusation. The king harbors moon-touched traitors. Marin clutched Tomas tighter, his small face buried against her neck, heart hammering as Rowan Hale barreled through the melee, sword cleaving the attacker's arm clean off. Bodies piled at the dais steps, loyalists and lunars entangled in a scripted brawl, Luna Seleni's followers chanting blood pact, while framing the violence as righteous outrage. Aurelian rose from his throne like a storm uncoiling, his voice a thunderclap that froze the room. Enough! The child is quarantined. No one approaches the northern fortress until this poison is purged. Guards swarmed, dragging away the howling demonstrators, but Marin's gaze locked on Aurelian across the blood-slicked floor. His eyes met hers, cold command masking the flicker of something raw, but Tomas whimpered, "Mama," his tiny hand clutching her collar, that silver charm pulsing warm against her skin. "Diplomatic shield." The words burned in her chest. They'd use the boy as leverage, parade him before Luna's mobs until the court cracked. She shoved through the dispersing throng, Rowan shadowing her until she stood before the dais, Tomas heavy in her arms. "You can't," she said, voice steady despite the quake in her knees. Courtiers gasped, power's edge cut sharp here where humans like her were chattel, not challengers. "Quarantine him alone, Luna's people will twist it, claim you've stolen their moon-blessed heir to starve the pact." Aurelian's jaw tightened, his presence a wall of shadowed silk and iron will, the air thickening with his scent of frost and old stone. "The decision stands, Keeper Ivers." "For his safety?" His tone brooked no fracture, but his gaze lingered on Tomas, then her, protective, possessive, the promise from moments ago curdling into isolation. Marin's throat closed. "Safety? You'll make him a pawn in your fortress cage while Selene rallies the factions." "Let me go with him, I'm his guardian." "No." The word fell like a guillotine. He stepped closer, voice dropping to a lethal murmur only she could hear. "Your presence invites more blades, you return to the outer palace, that's the ruling. Expulsion." Harsh, absolute, the throne's armor snapping shut. Whispers rippled, traded again, the low-born keeper discarded like debt fodder. She froze, Tomas's weight the only anchor as old terror clawed up, foster mother's hand shoving her into a slaver's cart. "Pay the debts, girl." Disposable, unlovable. Her chin lifted anyway, eyes burning into his. "As you command, my king." Venom laced the deference. She turned, Rowan's hand steadying her elbow as they pushed through the gawking court. Outside the throne room, the corridor's torchlight blurred through hot tears she refused to shed. Rowan murmured, "He's protecting you both, trust it," but she shook him off, Tomas dozing against her shoulder now, oblivious. "Protect?" By casting her out, the palace gates loomed, guards parting without question. Beyond sprawled the misty outskirts, human hovels clinging to vampire spires like beggars to scraps. She slipped through, skirts snagging on thorns, the child's soft breaths her only company as night swallowed her steps. Hours bled into the wild fringe, wind howling through skeletal oaks, Marin's feet raw on cobble turning to mud. A derelict barn offered shelter, straw-scented and dim. She sank into it, Tomas curled in her lap, his charm glowing faintly like a betrayed star. Traded again. The wound screamed louder than ever, unseen, unwanted, a tool sharpened for others' games. What did loyalty buy? A king's glance, then exile. She rocked the boy, whispering nonsense songs from her own lost childhood, resolve hardening amid the ache. She'd vanish deeper, raise him free of courts and pacts, even if it meant starving in shadows. Miles away, in the northern fortress's iron heart, Aurelian paced the nursery's vaulted stone, Tomas's crib a gilded prison under rune-etched wards. The child slept soundly, tended by silent thralls, but the king's hands clenched at his sides, the echo of Marin's voice a blade in his ribs. "As you command." Defiance wrapped in submission, her eyes had stripped him bare, seen the fracture in his rule. He sank into a chair by the fireless hearth, the room's chill mirroring the void her absence carved. Isolation clawed him now, the consort's death a decade-old scar reopening, power's throne demanded solitude, lest tenderness invite daggers. But Tomas stirred, murmuring "Mama" in sleep, and Aurelian's chest hollowed. The boy needed more than guards, needed her steady hands, her stubborn fire. And he, Gods, he needed the one soul who met his gaze without flinching, who thawed the starvation beneath his crown. Rowan entered without knock, face grim under torch glow. The Lunars claim victory, your quarantine proves their blood right. Mobs gather at the borders. Aurelian rose, decision crystallizing like frost on steel. Wielding power without trust had severed his deepest tether, command alone bred betrayal. No more. Summon the heralds, I break the ancient pact publicly at dawn court. Rowan's eyes widened, but the king pressed on, voice steel-edged with vulnerability. Send riders to the outskirts. Find Marin Ivers, bring her back not as keeper but as equal. Tell her, he paused, the words foreign on his tongue, tell her I choose her, us. Rowan nodded, vanishing into the night. Aurelian turned to the crib, gloved hand hovering over Tomas's curls, a father's ache piercing the sovereign's mask. Tenderness over domination. The quiet war he'd begun now demanded his surrender, public and raw. Dawn would shatter traditions, invite knives from all sides, but without her, the throne was ash. For the first time, the feared king understood, rule unchained by love was no rule at all. Aurelian strode into the shadowed heart of the night market, Tomas cradled against his chest like a living shield, the child's small weight the only anchor in the sea of hissing whispers. Council edicts be damned, he dismissed their frantic missives by courier at dawn, their pleas to barricade the palace and unleash the guard. Number let Luna's faction see him, the king unmasked and unarmed save for the boy who unraveled empires. Silver moonlight sliced through the arched vaults, glinting off fangs bared in the crowd as Luna Selene ardent rose from her dais at the market's core, her lunar kin fanning out like wolves scenting weakness. You dare parade the moon's claim through our streets? Luna's voice cut sharp, laced with the old pack's venom, her eyes locking on Tomas's silver charm dangling from the king's gloved hand. Murmurs rippled courtiers who'd slunk from the fortress, merchants pausing mid-haggle, all frozen as Aurelian halted 10 paces from her, the child's curls brushing his jaw. I dare more, Aurelian said, voice low thunder that silenced the square. He shifted Tomas higher, the toddler's drowsy eyes blinking open, tiny fist clutching the king's collar. No guards flanked him, Rowan had argued until hoarse, but Aurelian had silenced him with a look. This was surrender by exposure, not steel, the pact you invoke. Forged in blood ink that crumbles under scrutiny. He drew a sealed parchment from his coat, the forgery exposed by his scholars at midnight, clauses twisted to bind children like chattel to lunar rites. With a flick, he tore it asunder, fragments fluttering like ash onto the cobblestones. Gasps erupted, Luna's face paled, her factions surging forward. Lies, she snarled, but her gaze darted to the child's charm, the one that matched no lunar relic. Tomas stirred, murmuring, man, his fragmented voice piercing the tension like a blade. The crowd stilled. Aurelian felt the fracture widen, the ritual's cruelties laid bare in that single annulment, the binding clauses nullified by royal decree shouted to the stars. No child fuels your ambitions, not this one, not ever. Luna's hand twitched toward a concealed blade, her kin closing ranks, but Aurelian didn't flinch. The king's heart hammered, not from fear of fangs, but the raw vulnerability of holding Tomas here, politicization's pawn turned talisman. He'd rescued the boy from the fortress crypts at first light, where council holdouts had hidden him amid safeguarding rites, a farce to leverage the dispute. Now, with the crowd bearing witness, the rescue sealed, Tomas safe in his arms, the old law cracked open. From the market's edge, a figure pushed through, Rowan, broad shoulders carving a path, but it was Marin who emerged beside him, her chin lifted, eyes burning with that stubborn fire he'd glimpsed in stolen moments. She'd refused sanctuary, slipping Rowan's watch to return on her own terms. The crowd parted as she approached, her simple wool cloak no match for the silks around her, yet she walked as if the square belonged to her. Not hidden, she said, voice steady, stopping beside Aurelian without a bow. Her gaze flicked to Tomas, softening a fraction, then hardened on Luna. And not just protected. I claim guardianship legal binding. Explicit rights, veto over any right, custody shared with those who earn it, and a seat at reform. Custody laws rewritten here now, or the child stays with none. Luna laughed, brittle. A low-born keeper, the moon's blood. Outweighs your forgery, Marin cut in, unflinching under the faction's glares. Aurelian watched her, breath catching at the steel in her spine, the woman who'd frozen under council scrutiny now demanding the court bend. Power imbalance screamed in every stare. Vampire sovereign, human ward traded like debt, yet she refused to shrink. Consent, he'd vowed silently, no claiming without her voice. His gloved fingers brushed hers as he passed Tomas over, the transfer a quiet pact amid the storm. The toddler reached for her immediately, burrowing into her neck with a sigh. "Man!" Luna recoiled as if struck, her claim fracturing further. Aurelian stepped forward, the weight of eyes heavier than any crown. "Witness this?" He drew his ceremonial dagger, the one etched with blood-right sigils, ancient privilege to weave any child's lineage into royal veins for alliances, power, legacy. His hand trembled, unseen, loneliness clawed deeper than any wound, the fear that tenderness would unmake him. But Tomas's safety demanded it. With a precise slash across his palm, he spilled kingly blood onto the dagger's blade, then snapped it in two. I dissolve the blood right, no claim on his line, no thrones gain from his veins. Shocked silence swallowed the market. Courtiers whispered, Luna's faction faltered, blades sheathed. This was no minor concession, visible, visceral, the king's privilege shattered publicly. Change signaled not in words, but in the crimson drip staining the stones. Marin's eyes met his, a lingering look heavy with unspoken stakes. Protective instinct surged in him, warring with the ache to pull her close, but he held back chosen limits, accountability earned. Your terms, he said softly for her alone. Guardianship shared, Rowan as third. Rowan nodded from her side, his scarred face grim but approving, the guard's quiet doubts now loyalty forged in witness. The shift rippled outward like cracks in glacial ice. Scribes emerged at Aurelian's gesture, quills scratching under lantern glow as laws unspooled. No more ritual bindings without consent, found family overriding blood pacts, children wards of court and keeper alike. Luna stood isolated, her faction peeling away, some bowing to the new decree, others slinking into shadows, her wound of sidelining unhealed but her claim legally severed. By midnight, the market had transformed into an ad hoc assembly. Marin held Tomas as they drafted clauses together, her hand steady on parchment beside Aurelian's. No trading wards, she insisted, voice fierce. Debts paid another way. He inclined his head, the feared king's mask cracking further. No needless sacrifice. Their fingers brushed again, accidental electric tension coiling slow and sharp. She didn't pull away, but her eyes held warning, partnership, not possession. Rowan scooped Tomas for a moment, the toddler giggling at the guard's rough beard, found family taking root in laughter amid decrees. Courtiers lingered, not scattering, whispers turned to debates, the court's pulse quickening with fragile hope. As dawn's edge gilded the vaults, Aurelian walked Marin to the palace steps, Rowan trailing with the child. This changes everything, he murmured, voice raw, the sovereign's isolation fracturing under her gaze. She paused, Tomas asleep on her shoulder. Then make it mean something, no more thrones of ash. He nodded, the ache of connection starving no longer, a war-scarred king remaking rule on consent's blade. Knives awaited in the shadows, loyalties tested, but for the first time the throne felt alive with risk worth bearing.